Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Nell Pepper, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, I'm so pleased to introduce this virtual event with Gabriel Bump, presenting the paperback release of his debut novel, Everywhere You Don't Belong, in conversation with NANA KWAME ADJEI-BRENYAH. I hope you're all well and safe and keeping warm and dry in the blizzard tonight. Thank you so much for joining us virtually. Through virtual events like tonight's, Harvard Bookstore continues to bring authors and their work to our community and our new digital community during these challenging times. Every week, we'll be hosting events here on our Zoom account. And just like always, our event schedule will appear on our website at harvard.com, and you can sign up for our newsletter for more updates. This evening's discussion will conclude with some time for your questions. If you have a question for our speakers at any time during the talk tonight, click on the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and we'll get through as many questions as time allows. In the chat, I will be posting a link to purchase Everywhere You Don't Belong on harvard.com, as well as a link to donate in support of this series and of our store. Your purchases and financial contributions make events like tonight's possible and help ensure the future of a landmark independent bookstore in Harvard Square. And we thank you very much for showing up and for supporting us, and in support of our authors and of the incredible staff of booksellers at Harvard Bookstore. We sincerely appreciate your support now and always. And finally, as you may have experienced in virtual events, this past year, technical issues may arise. If they do, we'll do our best to resolve them quickly. We thank you so much for your patience and your understanding. And now I am so pleased to introduce our speakers. Gabriel Bump was awarded the 2016 Deborah Schlossberg Memorial Award for Fiction and the 2020 Ernest J. Gaines Award for Literary Excellence. He received his MFA in fiction from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. His nonfiction and fiction have appeared in Slam Magazine, the Huffington Post, Springhouse Journal, and other publications. NANA KWAME ADJEI-BRENYAH has an MFA from Syracuse University. He is the author of the acclaimed story collection Friday Black, and his work has appeared or is forthcoming in numerous publications, including Guernica, Printers Row, and the Breakwater Review, where ZZ Packer awarded him the Breakwater Review Fiction Prize. Tonight, they'll be discussing Gabriel Bump's novel, Everywhere You Don't Belong. This debut, which was named a New York Times Notable Book of 2020, is a hilarious heartbreaker of a coming-of-age novel. Tommy Orange described it in this way in his review for the New York Times. Bump's meditation on belonging and not belonging, where or with whom, how love is a way home, no matter where you are, is handled so beautifully that you don't know he's hypnotized you until he's done. And now I'm honored to turn things over to our speakers. The digital podium is yours, Gabriel and Nana.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, big applause. Yeah.
What's up, Nana?
What's going on, man? How you doing?
Good, good.
Are you gonna open us up with a little reading?
Yeah, I'll do that. How about that? Then we'll jump in this conversation. And I guess thanks, everybody for coming out. And, for me, for a lot of personal reasons, this event means a lot, right? Like, I think Nana and I, feels like we kind of like came up together, like in the same kind of time frame or something. And
oh, for real? And
yeah.
You know what's crazy? Tommy also wrote my New York Times review as well.
Yeah.
It's crazy. We'll get into it.
Like a year later. So I'm a big fan, I think when Friday Black came out, just devoured it in a sitting and then like read again a couple weeks later. And I was like, this dude's the truth, right? This is the next person.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
So yeah, before I just keep on gushing and that stuff, let me start off reading, then we'll jump into the conversation. So here is Everywhere You Don't Belong, a new cover out in paperback. And yeah, it's just a coming of age story, right? On the south side of Chicago, about an average kid just trying to figure out his place in the world, right? And just the wandering that entails for, children of all races, socioeconomic backgrounds, but I think, you know, that wandering is particularly prescient for young black kids in America, right? Trying to figure out where you fit in this world that doesn't really seem to care about you. And before we get into more of that in the conversation, I'm just going to start and read something really short. And it's from the final page of the book. And don't worry, there's no like spoilers or anything. It's like we don't figure out who the real murderer is on the final page. It's not that book, but I like to read this because I think it encapsulates, you know, what I meant when I started off like writing this and I got to the end. And is also the very last thing I wrote for this book. Right? So it feels like a good way to cap it off and to start a discussion. So here is where we belong. Sometimes when it's morning and we're both tired, I stare across the table and see Janice again in Juna's back seat. I see her hair rattling in the wind. I feel my hand on her knee, held there for hours and miles. I see her on the beach, picking up empty shells. I hear her kicking sand. I smell salt on her shoulders. I turn to her whenever the future frightens me. The present frightens me. The past ambushes my peace and sleep doesn't come. When the sun rises and Janice looks right at me, I see them all in her eyes. Grandma and Paul, happy, laughing, waving, safe. Everyone in South Shore, safe and happy. They're okay without us. They forgive us for leaving. We're okay too. Yes, right where we belong.
Woo! And you know, I'm sure there's tons of
Feel
that applause across the interweb. Man, bro, I feel like I've been like holding it in, even though I've told you a bunch of times. I love this book. This is the older hard copy edition.
Yeah.
This is really, really one of the bright spots of a obviously insanely difficult year. There's really a lot to admire in what you said. It feels so good to have like, to know there's like, I guess, contemporaries or people doing what you're kind of trying to do and see them come out in a work that feels just so singular to an individual, so particularly of the self. And I feel like so proud to know that this book was written, you know, and then even more so to see how it's been received. And I'll talk about that later, but I'm very excited to get to do this because it's cool to be getting to do this conversation now reminds me like I'm in a class and group of people who are really pretty dope. And so I really love this book. And one of the things I love most about it, this kind of line level, I call it like line level appreciation. I think you were so able to surprise and sort of stun me on like a sentence level. You could turn a sentence and kind of really make it sing. And what I think is like, you know, just weren't afraid to do whatever like the hell you wanted to do. And this is kind of an impossible question to start off with, but how do you describe your own style and like the rhythm of your prose? For me, I always think about like a certain kind of staccato power to your writing, and that sometimes aids this kind of dark humor thing that's there. And I'm not usually a big fan of comps, but Dennis Johnson came to my mind a lot, actually. I felt like a Dennis Johnson-esque willingness to sort of jump to this poetic at a moment's notice in a way that really makes sense. A line that I'm thinking of that comes to my head is, I remember the Jonah section ending, I wonder if he sees benevolence in his shadow. And I'm like, God damn, bro. Like, you know, just the way you were willing to just go like all the way off. How would you describe your style though?
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, man. And I guess like, you know, the feeling is mutual too, right? Like in all regards. So I guess like to start off, like you mentioned something about writing into the surprise, right? And like, you went to Syracuse, right? Like I studied with a lot of writers that like also learned under George Saunders, right? Like Adam Levin at the Art Institute and Jeff Parker down at UMass. And I mean, that idea of writing towards the surprise at all times, right, was really, I think, drilled into me. And I feel like there is a direct connection between like Saunders drilling that into people that
That's so cool. Yeah.
yeah. So I think that like that's something that I don't know, like I learned early on when I started writing, like when after I transferred back to Chicago and went to school at the Art Institute and started like really seriously writing this book, like writing fiction. Like that was the first thing I was kind of taught, and it's really stuck with me because like writing that way makes it fun, right? Like if you're always trying to surprise the reader, like you're always trying to surprise yourself, right? And so I don't know, like I guess my writing style has changed. I'm sure you feel the same way, right? Like the first book, you're still like figuring out, what you sound like, right? Like what you want your voice to be. And I feel like even if my writing style maybe has changed a little bit, like that just real basic element of it, right? It's like trying to do the surprising thing as often as possible without being over the top.
Yeah.
And then actually like the Johnson thing is interesting too, because particularly in that chapter, like the end with Jonah and the dunk. And I think like a lot of those early, like the first half of the book is told in these chapters that could be like standalone short stories, right? Like time moves in this, in this like jumping way, right? Like it's like 13 years in the first half of the book gets encapsulated. And in a lot of ways that was influenced just by Jesus' son, right? Like I'm sure we can like talk about, all the things.
I can feel it. I didn't know that, but I can feel it in the best way.
Yeah. And and I think with like the story in like Jesus' son, and I think everyone has their own favorite story in Jesus' son, but the one like that I could just read, if I had to pick one story to just read forever, it'd probably be Dun Dun. Right. And like it's kind of like a throwaway and it's like really short, but the way that it ends, I think is really beautiful because he takes this like daring leap into the future, right? Like after the story ends and like he tries to understand this person happening. I feel like, if reading my book now with that in mind, anybody at home, you can kind of just see, right? Like it's, I'm clearly trying to do that, right? I'm trying to pull that off.
Man, bro, that's so cool. And like that Dennis Johnson compliment, honestly, that's my highest compliment. Like if because I've had a lot of eras of trying to be Dennis Johnson and just not ringing off for me, but I think, and obviously you have shades of that, but it's very, very, very much individual. You very, very much have your own thing. And but it's cool to know that and to see like some influences do poke through and how you make them your own. I had no idea of that actually. So that's actually awesome. My favorite, I mean, Car Crash by Hitchhiking, everyone will say that, but I'm big on Emergency too. Like that's my Emergency is like my shit. Thinking about your style though, the dialogue also was something that just I felt like the dialogue in this book was always a place. I think for some people, dialogue maybe energy might trip or drop. I think when you had dialogue, it just jumped up. And maybe it has to do with that surprise thing. I just didn't know what people were going to say. I didn't know when. I was going to read a whole like 2 pages, but I'm not going to do it now just for time. But there's so many times where like it'd be 3 or 4 people talking at once, and it's just like masterful to me. And your willingness to show people using their words to stab. And I remember that I think it might be Bones who says to both Jonah and Claude, like, Claude can't come. He has to go fuck his grandma. Just stuff like that. And like just being it was so entertaining. Can you talk about your sort of philosophy and approach to dialogue?
Yeah. I mean, like, I feel like when dialogue falls off in writing, it's because like the writer isn't interested in writing good dialogue, right? Like the,
Yeah.
like the writer kind of just says, okay, I need to have these people talking about what they're going to eat for dinner or something like that. And like, I think real dialogue, like good dialogue that I like try to write, right, is one that it's like an aspect of the story that like adds something to the telling, right? It's like whether it like adds a surprise, like you were saying, or just like I feel like you can write a good line in dialogue, just like you could write a good line like in a standalone paragraph or something, and just taking like the writing really seriously.
Yes. I was gonna say I can feel you take the dialogue very seriously.
Yeah, maybe like I don't know, maybe I spend too much time trying to figure out like the right 2 words for somebody to say. But like I also read a ton of plays like all the time too, and I think that
yeah, you do.
Yeah. Like I guess I always like for as long as I've been seriously writing fiction, like I've just been seriously reading plays and like trying to write plays, right? And like I think that actually it provides this really nice balance, right? I think for me in my practice, like stripping.
That's cool.
away-
I want to read plays too because it's working for you. And
no, plays are good. Like plays are like really good, and there's like really awesome writing in it, like poetry and like moving character development. I think it's really awesome.
Okay, because you said that, I'm gonna read some of your book because it speaks to that idea. And I hope it's not too long. This is in this is page 36 in the hard copy version. It's from Jonah and the Dunk. And it's just a section where like I'm glad you said it because I was thinking of plays and as well. So I didn't know, but I think it's kind of cool how much of I think your personality and your interest comes out in the book. But it goes, so Jonah, Paul asks when grandma invited the new neighbors over, you ball like the devil. I guess maybe I should set up a little bit. This basketball prodigy has come to town, and him with his parents have come to visit the protagonist of the novel and his grandma, who's a central character, and his like Paul, who's like kind of like not an uncle, but kind of uncle figure. He's in the house figure as well. So that's where this is. So Jonah, Paul asked when grandma invited the new neighbors over, you ball like the devil? Yes, sir, Jonah said. What's that supposed to mean? Jonah's dad asked. Bad, Paul said. You know, bad as hell. Oh, Jonah's mom said. What about you? Jonah's dad asked me. What? I asked back. You ball? Jonah's dad asked me. Claude's too angelic, Paul asked me. Paul said. That's wonderful, Jonah's mom said to me. Where did you play? Jonah's dad asked Paul. Paul can't shoot dead fish, Grandma said from the kitchen. I learned in the cage, Paul said. What? I asked everybody. The cage up the street? Jonah's dad asked Paul. Up from the rucker, Paul said, leaned back, rubbed his belly. Wait, Jonah's dad said, held up his arms. Hold up, Jonah's mom said. What's a cage? I asked everybody again. You're not from Chicago? Jonah's mom asked Paul. New York is basketball, Paul said. New York, Jonah's dad said to his hands. Mecca, Paul said. You're from New York? Jonah's dad asked. You're asking my son about basketball? Jonah's mom said. Who do you think you are? Jonah's dad asked. Where do you get off? Jonah's mom asked. I played against Tim Hardaway, Jonah's dad said. Me too, Jonah's mom said. He's my little cousin. Doc Rivers, Jonah's dad said. Casey Russell gave me his shoes. Juwan Howard drove me to school every morning, Jonah's mom said. Michael Jordan was born in Brooklyn, Paul said. Nate Archibald, Grandma yelled from the kitchen. Ben Wilson is a saint, Jonah's dad yelled. Isaiah Thomas, Jonah's mom yelled. Lou Alcindor, Grandma yelled. They yelled names at each other until Grandma served the pasta. They yelled with forks in their mouths, spit marinara across the table. Jonah and I sat there, exchanged apologetic looks. When Grandma put down her apple pie, Jonah's mom gave up. Jonah, Jonah's mom said, we're leaving. Jonah, Jonah's dad said, Scottie Pippen is better than Patrick Ewing. And it's more, and I wouldn't go on to the Willis Reed part, but like, it's just so good. It's just like this da-da-da, 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 da-da, and that feels like a play to me. You know what I mean? I'm trying to read all that. I hope that didn't feel like annoying.
No, I mean, it was cool to hear you read it. And I mean, like the thing, like, so I guess I'm interesting to hear is like your kind of take on this too. But I feel like if you're gonna spend all this time like writing a book, you should put in stuff that just like you and your friends could like laugh at, right?
Right. Yes.
Like,
And but I'm from New York on top of it. So you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I really felt all of it. And I'm kind of, I find myself being like, seeing this thing happen, this thing that really happens, and also finding myself aligning with Paul, like, but I'm from New York at the end of the day. Mecca, when he says Mecca, I feel that, you know? And like this like genuine fight that's like, you're like, is kind of emerging. But that's funny that that you have some intent in that way, like with like something that you know would be for like you and your friends. Is that like what you were thinking as you were writing that?
Yeah, well, I guess like in a few ways, right? Like when I was, I guess like right before I kind of started writing this book, like I was just writing a lot about like Chicago high school basketball players, right? And I feel like maybe 10 years, it just feels like less intense over the past decade or something. But it felt like there used to be this real discussion about like where the home of like basketball was, right? Like which city, Chicago or New York, like produced the best talent. Like there's even that weird like MTV show, if you remember it, like Battlegrounds, which was like, the best high school players.
Definitely watched it.
Yeah. So it was like this weird, like hyper intense discussion about, you know, basketball. And so I mean, like this, like maybe one day I'd like to write some kind of like basketball novel, but it felt like if I was going to have people that I like knew, admired, like talked to on a daily basis, if I want them to read my book, then like I would have to kind of give them something too, besides just kind of a sad kid trying to find himself. Right.
Bro, and it's so key because like, again, I didn't know that, but the basketball writing, I had a question about that, is some of my favorite writing in the book, the Jonah and the dunk. I'm not going to just talk about that one chapter, but that, like, you know, it's such an important, you could feel the fun and life in it. And also like the reverence and how I think Paul says, boy, like you're a religion. And that's how some people really their attitude is towards basketball. And you really capture that quickly and effectively, like this life-changing, genuine, he's going to quit smoking now, and people are going to change their life. Having seen this kid play basketball. And I think that conversation, I think it used to be really intense. I think it's funny, like it's almost like PG County people just said it's us and we win now.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's almost like the conversation dropped down about what's basketball. They had the show on time actually. About Basketball County or whatever it is. And so that's really interesting to see. But I think I really love that instinct to like include something like that, because I felt, everyone always says felt seen, but I felt very genuinely felt seen in those moments, and I understood what was happening, and I also understood that some people wouldn't understand that was happening. That made me like it even more. You know, some people might not be in on that section, but I think the rhythm and pace of it is enough to keep people, they'll still like it. But I felt like I would like it even more. And I like that you didn't care that some people might be left out. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and like, cause you know just by the tone of the exchange, like it's important to these people, even if you don't know anything about basketball, right? Like it establishes them in like a place, right? Like New York and Chicago, and gives some like background. But I mean, that's kind of, I don't know, like it's, for me, it's kind of cool to incorporate those kind of references in my work, like instead of, you know, incorporating like long references to Proust or something like that.
For sure.
Like, you know, it's like kind of, I don't know, inserting like our interest in literature, right? And like saying that you don't have to know this to enjoy the book, but you can always Google who these people are, right? Like who Willis Reed is if you don't know who Willis Reed is.
And you know, and Lou Alcindor, and like there's also, it's funny, like that's a different kind of, that's another craft. There's the poets of their own right. They're doing this. There's a legacy and there's a depth and there's an awareness of it that a community has that isn't often represented that same way. So I think that's actually super awesome. Okay, moving through a little bit, because I could talk about just those sections forever. I think there's like a great melancholic energy in this novel. And there's a sort of, I think, a powerful tension that moves the story forward is like us wanting relief for Claude. Like, you know, Claude, who's like this, you know, average is what is like, as I understand what I'm saying, average, but he's also like, you know, in his ability to feel stuff and also weather storms. And he's also spectacular in some ways, in the way many of us are, I guess. So it could be average or not. But I think he's such a great vehicle for this story. I'm wondering, how did you know this was Claude's story, and what was it like writing him through a novel like this?
Yeah, and I guess like that term average is like kind of loaded, right? And I guess the way like why I kind of land on it is that he's like average in a like big historical sense, right? Like he's not like you know, he's not gonna play in the NBA, right? He's incapable of doing that. He's not gonna get like a full scholarship to Harvard and cure cancer, right? Like someone like Claude, you know, like most people, right? Like just kind of exists in the back of the classroom and has to deal with traumas and like heartbreak and like has to persevere like all humans do, right? In their little way. And I guess like I realized it was Claude's story. I guess pretty early on, because this started out as just a short story about Claude and grandma, right? And it was, and this was soon after like my own grandmother, who's like the inspiration for the grandmother here, passed away when I was in college. And I guess we might as well get into that like story. I think it's helpful, right? But I didn't really know my grandmother that well, like up until she got really sick and like had to move to Chicago from Harlem, where she lived most of her life, where like my mom's from, where my like cousins, aunts and uncles like all just lived in Harlem. And we just, for whatever reason, you know, didn't make it out there that much when we were growing up. Just people are busy, you know, people have lives and stuff. But so my grandma got really sick and ended up having to come to Chicago to essentially just live in like hospice with us. And I got to know her really well. Like during the summer, we'd have to take care of her. Like my parents were working or out of town, like I'd be at the house, you know, with her and watching her. And so when we died, I think just like when she died, like all young writers trying to process grief, like I turned it into like a short story, right? Just with Claude and this grandma. And I realized that like exercise, you know, it's the way in which like writing can be therapy. You know, like it's not therapy, like therapy is therapy, but like writing can give your mind like an outlet. So the book just like grew out of this young man, because initially it was, okay, here's Claude, and I'm glad this didn't end up being in the book, but here's Claude taking care of his grandmother before she dies, right? And it's like, well, I want to know more about Claude and grandma. And so take a step back, and like, this is Claude 13. And that's like, okay, well, I want more. Like Claude weighs 5, like in grandma is. And so how did it just become Claude and grandma? So it just like grew out of this relationship, right? And so
and that's awesome that so much came, and it is sort of, again, is understandable, and you feel the echoes of something, even though that's not a book, but in sort of Claude's sort of personal energy, you feel some of that sort of, I guess, origin, even in this version, which I think is a cool forensic like truth or something. That's really awesome. I just want to flag to the audience, if you have questions, I'm going to ask a couple more, but if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section and I'll get to them in a second. But yes, I that's really interesting to know. And again, I feel like I can feel that. I had another question about some other characters. Big Columbus and the Red Belters, they serve sort of an important function, and they're sort of an important force in the story. And they're a gang, but also you let them speak their truth out, so we know at least what they're trying to achieve. Can you talk about how Big Columbus and this gang works in the novel?
Well, like I just knew that if I was going to like write about South Shore, like I would have, not that like this this book is supposed to be like really close to reality, right? It happened, but I feel like, at least from my experience, it's hard talking about South Shore without talking about like violence, right? Like
Yeah.
especially at this, I guess in Chicago, not necessarily in South Shore, right? But in Chicago, like 10 years ago, just like there's now, there was this massive spike. Like the violence in Chicago now isn't necessarily happening in South Shore, but 10 years ago it was. And so it was really central to the narrative of it. And I wanted to, I don't know, like to depict it with some like empathy. I guess we always try to.
For sure.
But then even someone like Big Columbus doesn't necessarily exist in Chicago, right? Like there's no just one big
Right.
like street gang like controlling everything.
Of course.
But what I've loved most about Big Columbus is I think he's like closer to, I don't know, like historical figures in like community organizations that can sometimes like turn violent. Like that's how I actually view the Red Belters, right? It's like
Yeah.
a organization that figures out that like protecting themselves is a necessity, like protecting the community, right? And so, yeah, I mean, like I really love Big Columbus, like as a character, and I still do. And I wish that I actually gave him like more screen time, but it's like Claude's story, right? Like I wish that I could just leave Claude's perspective and be in like Big Columbus's perspective for a few chapters.
Yeah, you know, and I mean I understand that, but I think I'm thinking of the when he jumps. Are they in a? I'm thinking in a fast food restaurant where he jumps on the counter and says like his piece. It's like it's his intention is clear. You know, he is working. Like I think you did imbue him with some empathy, and he's like a person. He's trying to get people to organize.
Yeah.
Maybe he's a little like I guess my way or the highway about it, but also he's all in as well, and that speaks to his character, I guess. And I think that's something important for me as I was reading as well. I viewed him. I think you were able to humanize that, both the idea of the Red Belters, who kind of Big Columbus becomes emblematic of pretty well, because they were given a voice. You know, I think like people do the gang thing and there's sort of like this like nebulous sense of violence. But I think when you give them a voice, we kind of get to see that they're people. Those are people.
Yeah, and I mean, even when they're first like recruiting in the community, like Claude is able to say no, right? Because like he comes from like the stable like household, but then like he just lists off all of his classmates that like couldn't say no, right? Like, okay, I can go join this organization because I like got to feed my younger siblings, right? And so I think that like representing that too, because I mean, like before, like I was interested in writing about sports. Like I wrote about like violence and gangs in Chicago for my high school newspaper, and if I don't like if you talk to gang members, like no gang members, like that it's actually people seeking out community more so than it is like people, seeking out violence or anything, right? Like it's more complicated than I think we often want to believe.
All right, so this would be my last question before I jump to Q&A, even though if there's time, I'll probably throw some more of mine in there. So again, if you have questions, please throw them in the Q&A. I want to talk, you mentioned them a little bit, but we share what some mentors and some of that stuff. I'm speaking specifically of Arthur Flowers, who I really like to evoke in these kind of spaces, because he's kind of like, I feel like Black literature's best kept secret or something. He's been instrumental in so many people's lives. Can you talk about how people like Flowers have helped you grow as a writer? Who some of your mentors and writers who have like kind of helped shape the way for you have been?
Yeah. I mean, I guess just talking like just speaking directly towards Flowers, right? Like you were fortunate enough to be in a classroom with Flowers, right? Like
yeah.
And I think that
several, yeah.
And I mean like that, especially when you start like talking about MFA programs or like undergraduate writing programs, like there aren't many like Black creative writing professors, right? Like I never had one. Like I have never had a Black.
That's wild. That's wild.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. And so like I met Flowers through Jeff Parker at UMass, and I don't know, in his Flowers way, he just like instantly brought me under his shoulder and like, you know, treated me like the flock. We went out to get some coffee and drinks, and like I even, like, I don't know, like when I drove down to North Carolina, I made sure that I knew exactly where my flower prayer beads were. Like, as you get, you know, with
wait, I have a High John the Conqueror of him. I have a High John the Conqueror. Yeah, I was gonna show it on the thing, but if that's like bad, I don't want. I'll show it.
Yeah, sure.
Like this High John the Conqueror route for me, and like it's like my most magical item that I have.
Yeah,
people don't know this is a magical ass man, dog. Like I don't know how to
explain. Show it. Hold it up. Let's see it. Yeah.
So he took this root and then he puts the shell and he puts his bees in it. He rubs it with a certain kind of oil. It's like a case for it and everything. And it's like lucky. If you search if you want to know what this about this, if you search High John the Conqueror root, you'll like get information about it. Zornia Herson has written about it. But yeah, he made that for me. He's a magical ass guy.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just like, I think it's really important for like young writers like us to just see, I don't know, to see Flowers like being himself, right? And like, and really stressing like writing your story, right? Like there's a lot of pressure to conform, and you think that like, you know, Flowers hasn't necessarily conformed, right? Like
no, he's himself. He's himself.
Like his work is amazing. His performances are amazing. So you see someone succeed like that, and I think it's easier for us to be ourselves, right? So
I can be like half of myself is the way Arthur is completely himself. It'd be so great because and he's a champion of other people's work. To be honest, the way I know when I first heard of you was Arthur telling me, it's this guy, man, you have to check out work. You know, Arthur's like, he's a contender, like he's gonna be a star, like that kind of thing. You know, Arthur talks, and it's really cool to have that kind of energy out there in the universe for you. You know, so yeah, Arthur's the man. If people don't know the name Arthur Flowers, you should check it.
Yeah, and then he actually did the same. Like when I first met him, I was like, because I think I would just start at UMass, and I think that you might have just started at Syracuse too. But I was like, okay, so which young writers like do you like? And the cohort, he's like, yeah, we got this brother Nana. I think he's got the gift. He's got the gift. You just know. And so I was like, okay, yeah, I'll make sure I keep an eye out.
He's wild, man. It's so crazy to think about that this is even happening here. I gotta like screenshot this and send it to him.
Yeah.
Someone screenshot it and send it to me because I gotta do that. Anyways, let me get to these questions from the audience. I'm going to just go through them. We'll start with Antoine. What's up? What's good, Antoine? I don't know if you know who that is. Another great writer. He said, question for both. Has the pandemic affected your creativity? So what resources or practices have helped you gain control over it during this time?
Yeah, well, what about you? You want to take this one first?
It has affected me. I was like totally like not doing great in the beginning at all. I kind of weirdly hit my stride by force of will. I did like the hotel thing. Kind of went crazy in the hotel, but I wrote a lot. I'm working on a novel right now. I'm in therapy, which I should have been for way before. I was gonna ask you about this because like it's a question I forgot, because writing a book is one thing, waiting for a book to come out is a whole nother thing, having a book out in the world is another thing again, and they all have their own really particular stress to them. But besides that, the pandemic has been strange because there's like this collective grief happening. I had just been grieving my own father, so like but I'm back. But being in therapy was great for my personal wellness, which I think eventually comes back into the writing. What else? I try to like do some kind of physical activity if I can. I try to meditate, very regular stuff. But I also try to be nice to myself about it all. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think, yeah, like I had the same. Well, it was weird because like I was on tour when we got locked down. So it was like I went home
Oh, nuts.
after like, and you know how like just tour can, I don't know, it's like you
Tour is
don't
brutal.
really have time to think about the stress and anxiety levels, but they're like constantly there, just humming. And
Tour is
so,
a brutal experiment. It's brutal. Yeah.
which is a weird thing to complain about, but it's like another. So I just
That's
went home, like locked down. I was like, okay, my book's in the world, and I'm just sitting home. Now what? And took some, like, didn't write much of anything, like during the summer, even during the fall. Like I tried to do some like screenplays. That was actually kind of helpful, right? Because it's that dialogue thing, just like working in like dialogue.
Bro, me too. So weird.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that was like a good shift. But I mean, I think like starting therapy again, right? Like I was in therapy like in grad school, like towards the end, and then stopped for a little bit because it's like, oh, I'm feeling better, so now I'll stop. And then
Bro, me too. What the fuck? That's so
exactly.
funny.
Exactly. Like, okay, everything's fine, everything's cool. I'll stop going to therapy. And then you realize that, you know, it's really helpful. Like, it's really helpful for the work, right? And because you can't like work if you're, I don't know, like if nothing seems to matter, right?
Yeah.
Like that's really
Yeah.
like a good mindset to write in. Or like if you're just so anxious, you can't like let go of those anxieties. So actually recently I feel like I've gotten into some kind of rhythm, like writing prose again.
Yeah.
And I think it's because like I bought these really nice notebooks that I like. And so like I'm just like writing longhand so I don't like get distracted by like getting on the internet if I'm on my computer. Like I just kind of sit on the couch and we'll just try and write like, slowly, and it just feels like fun again. Like it feels like there's less pressure to do it. It's harder to just delete the whole page, like all that stuff. So
Longhand is longhand is powerful. I try to jump to longhand sometimes, and for pieces of my novel, I've had to. I was writing on the thing that Kwame Adjeei-BRENYAH does, where there's no internet on it. I've been trying to trick myself out because Twitter and stuff and the internet in general is poison for writing and also like for your personal happiness.
I mean, the jokes are that's like so like I see something funny on Twitter. I'm like, I'm never leaving this app again, right? Like,
it's so funny. And also, you know, I have very, very, very like super dope, I'm sure you feel this too, like personal interactions with random people on Twitter all the time. And it's like, do I just leave that alone? I guess eventually maybe but through Instagram and Twitter, people will just hit you up who you would have never had access to otherwise.
No, exactly.
And I don't know. A couple of people asked, what books have you both been reading and loving recently?
Let's see, what's one I read? Well, I reread Tar Baby by Toni Morrison.
Oh yeah.
About a week ago or something. And just amazing, right? Let's talk about like a surprise when she says, like, how can you not miss someone that fucked like a star? It's like Toni Morrison, like putting that right in the sentence.
Yeah.
Really awesome. Middlemarch. Actually, I read Middlemarch a couple of weeks ago. George Eliot. Didn't think that I'd like it, but I actually like sat down and powered through it. So I don't know about you, but I wasn't reading much this past year either, and so it feels
very difficult
back into it, like just reading a lot of stuff.
I've been that's what was so that's on like, and not just because I'm here. That's what was so great about this. Like at the time I read this, I was like struggling, and I had a ton of, you know, the blurb thing. It's brutal, basically. You know, it's just a lot of stuff. Like not, and it's not that you don't want to read the stuff. It's just like the bandwidth isn't really there. But I read this book, like it brought me to the place where Tommy is exactly right. The hypnotic state where you're just like in it. I was just in it, and it felt so good because you almost start to think, am I like broken now? And this was one of the books that like kind of made me know, like, the world is super bad. It's a pandemic right now. Relax. You know, we're in the middle of like this crazy social upheaval. out protesting every other day in a pandemic, and I'm in New York.
Yeah.
So like, you know, it was a really, really important book for me for that reason. I'm trying to think a book, I'm trying to look at my like pile of, there's a book called Maya Monticello I'm reading. I think it's great. It's not out yet. I hate doing that. I always do that. It's like a book that you can't buy right now, but it ends up dominating my reading time. So that's what I'll say now. There's tons of stuff. I can't, that's Sabrina Karina that story collection is another beautiful story collection, which I read a while ago now, but super beautiful.
Oh, and I guess like a book that I'm excited about is Don Teal's book that's coming out tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Milk, Blood.
Yes.
It's coming out like the snippets of. Have you read the full thing yet? I haven't read the full thing.
Yeah, I blurbed it.
Yeah.
And that was so her book, your book, Nadia Wusu's book are like the books that like made me feel like, okay, I'm not like I can still read. You know? But no, Milk, Blood, Heat, I have read the entire book. Another shout out. We're gonna shout out as many. It's February now. We're shouting out as many as possible right now.
Mateo Ashkapour.
Yes, Black Buck is
Yeah.
out by Black Buck. He's also HMH Gang. That's my same publisher.
Yeah.
And actually, Don Teal and Nadia, we have the same agent.
Oh, really? Word, yeah.
Meredith, shout out Meredith. But Don Teal's book is spectacular. I actually taught the story An Almanac of Bones like way before the book was out, because it was out in some magazine, and it's a spectacular, like no gas, spectacular book.
Yeah.
Here's another question. That was nice though. All those things are true. Like they're important books, as is Everywhere You Don't Belong. Someone said there's a lot of discussion and disagreement in the writing community about whether it's important and worth the time and money to get an MFA. Curious if you folks have thoughts on that. Thank you for a wonderful conversation. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like I don't know, like I don't really have too many strong like feelings about the discussion, right? I guess like I know enough writers that have not gotten an MFA and have found success just through other avenues, right? Like whether it's entering publishing in another way. I think like I can only speak just like personally. I think that like for me, getting an MFA was like really important, right? Because I'm someone that like needs structure in order to, or especially like when I was younger, when I was like 23, like I really needed structure in order to take like writing seriously. And in like when you're in an MFA, it's like, okay, you got to turn in a 15-page short story this week, right? Like you have to sit down and write. And I guess like you can read a lot of cool stuff that I don't think I'd be able to find on my own, right? I feel like those are some benefits. And I mean, like we're talking about Arthur Flowers now, right? Like I think you can meet like mentors. If you go to the right one that's like good for you, you can meet like mentors that turn into friends that you like know forever, right? Like I was just texting Jeff Parker this morning, right? Like for no reason, right? We just kind of go back and forth.
I think the conversation around MFA is the Twitter treatment, which happens in so many writing conversations that become these like really reductive, weird arguments without any type of, I don't know, it gets weird quick. MFAs are a huge category of types of program, and not every MFA is the same. The idea of MFA in its best self can obviously benefit a lot of people, as you've said in my MFA. I know the more or less impossible for my book to come out when it came out without that MFA program. That said, I think it's very important and essential for us as writers and as artists to obviously know that it's a bad thing for an MFA or any institutional program to be the only way to find success as an artist. Like that's clear to me, and so MFA or not, it's also like the question has to be circumstantial. It has to be about what you are looking for, what you need. There's a great access to I read like experimental fiction for the first time. I realized, oh my God, I can do all this and that. It's actually going to tie back into a question that someone asked that I'll get into next after this, but I was introduced to so many writers that I would have never have seen before. I was able to see myself alongside Heather artists who I respected and was like, you know what, they're human just like me. I was able to find mentors. But a lot of the people who were my mentors didn't get MFA themselves. So I learned that like it's about being honest in the craft and trying. And like reading is the biggest part. It's like you get a really good reading list. And also for me, I like getting workshopped. Some people don't like getting workshopped. It depends on where you are in your development and how there's so many things. I think I remember when that was an MFA versus New York City thing came out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like this constant debate that I feel like we had to have like every 3 days, you know? And I think the question is good, but I think like the way that we often think about it feels like it's yes or no thing. I think it has to be very much your circumstances decide whether it makes sense. That said, I do think many of these MFAs are exploitative and cost way too much, and you're paying for I'm not sure exactly what as well. And that's just you know, I know I couldn't have gone to MFA that cost a certain amount. That's just I couldn't have done that. And so that's also a reality as well.
And I actually do wonder if that's, I mean, first of all, like you shouldn't go into debt, right, to get like an MFA in something, right? Like, and I think that people feeling the need to do so is an example of the system being broken a little bit. Right?
Yes.
And like go into debt if you want to go like medical school, right? Like these. But I feel like Twitter actually like provides like an interesting element to this conversation too, right? Because like on Twitter, it's like you have access to like writers, you can like meet people that way and like get connections. Like I'm not good enough at Twitter to understand how to do that or like make the best out of it, right? But I feel like I see people carving a niche for themselves like in the online space, right? Like through social media. And so I can't even talk anymore about that because I'm not an expert at all. But like,
well, on some levels, what you're doing right now is some of the benefits of being an MFA. You know what I'm saying? This kind of event, this kind of thing, and answering the questions like you're answering right now is giving some of that same energy. So there's a certain democratizing that happens with Twitter. Like even George's new book, that book is exactly like that. That's like his class on the Russians.
Yeah.
You know, so there's opportunities all over the place. I think it's going to be like person to person and also program to program, and so it becomes like very specific. Let me see if I can get a couple more of these questions in. We touched upon this question as she was typing it, but could you talk about some writers tend to speak to you specifically as a Black man? That's from Sarah.
Some writers that speak to me. Let's see. I think, like Ralph Ellison, Invisible Man, is probably the writer and the novel like I hold in the most esteem. Like even his like essays collections. But I guess when I say hold in the most, like the highest esteem, I think like Toni Morrison. I guess I just was like rereading some Toni Morrison. But then that's like everyone's answer, right? So like the obvious answer.
Not wrong though.
It's like it's Toni Morrison, that's kind of everybody else, right? And like I think that there's a reason for that. Like Ralph Ellison, I think like Claude McKay, right? Like reading Claude McKay's Harlem Renaissance novels, you know, there's a reason I named like my protagonist after Claude McKay, right? It's like I think Home to Harlem is a really important book. And I mean, let's see. You want to jump in, Nana? I'm trying to think of some.
Yeah. And it's connected to the FFA thing. Huh?
I was saying Arthur Flowers, right? Like
Arthur Flowers, sure. I have one of his. This is the Hoodoo Book of Flowers. That's one of his.
The Hoodoo Book of Flowers.
You know, and that's just a important guide, like spirit book. But the thing I was gonna say is in the MFA I was introduced to Ishmael Reed.
Yeah.
And Mumbo and Mumbo Jumbo is that's one of the bigger, that's huge for me. Mumbo Jumbo is the answer that like made me realize, oh, I can be myself, not really care what is gonna be said, and like I didn't realize writing could do some of those things until I read Ishmael Reed. But I guess also Toni Morrison for sure. I remember reading the memoir Black Boy and be like, oh, whoa, you know, there's certain aspects of that were really interesting. Yeah, that's my answer. It's like for sure. Arthur
Oh, and
Flowers.
actually Tony Cade, because if someone's actually like trying to create like a reading list, like Gorilla My Love by Tony Cade Bombara is like one of the best short story collections that just jumped into. And like, I guess the thing with Ishmael Reed and in a different way, like Walter Mosley, is those guys like published a book a year, right? For like 40 years. I mean, like, it's just crazy prolific. And so I think like I admire like both of them, right? Like just to be able to sustain that level of excellence, like and just spit it out.
Yeah, I met Walter Mosley and I was like ignorantly, I'm always like ashamed of how ignorant I am. I didn't know his stuff, and I got a book of his, and you see also by Walter Mosley, and it was like, I was like shook. So I got to read some of the stuff. So next time I met him, I got to like not feel like an idiot. So this is a good one considering what you said. What plays would you recommend reading to help you writing dialogue?
Help writing dialogue. Well, I think like anything Susan Laurie Parks has written. I mean, even like her novel. Annie Baker is a really exciting. She won like the Pulitzer a few years ago, but has since like written a lot of plays. Anything Annie Baker? Annie Baker, okay. Yeah. She's really amazing. And then I mean, if you like really just want to jump into dialogue, like just reading August Wilson's Century Cycle, like reading from like, you know, starting in the 1900s up to the 2000s, so the 1990s. Like that is an amazing way to just get kind of lost in voice. And they're plays, you can kind of read them in an afternoon, right? Just do that for a week.
Love it. I'm adding this. This is something I'm adding to my like preparation and stuff. This is good.
Yeah, plays are cool. I mean, like, like I sometimes like to read like Beckett too. Beckett definitely. Eugene O'Neill, I think, is actually a nice person to read when you're like want to write fiction, but just want to get want to get like a closer look at dialogue, because his plays like can read like prose because the stage directions are so kind of you know, full. Yeah, so there's a lot of great plays out there. Can't really go wrong.
Beautiful. And here's I think the last question from Miriam. To Gabriel's point of Big Columbus being such a great character, and with Grandma being basically alive, are there any other characters that you carry a torch for, or wish you could keep writing their story?
Yeah, I mean, I really like Bubbly and Nugget.
Me too. In the beginning, I felt missing them. Yeah.
Well, and I think that like, and I mean, that was intentional. Like there are so many characters in the beginning that leave and don't come back. I think that's like Claude's story, right? It's like dealing with abandonment. I mean, Connie Stove, the journalism teacher. Like, she's worthy of like a book. And in previous drafts, like Simone, another character from Missouri, like I'll just like behind the scenes. So in a previous drafts, right, like Janice doesn't re-enter the picture. Like Janice, when Claude goes to Missouri, Janice stays back in Chicago and doesn't appear again in the book. And like Claude and Simone develop this relationship. And I thought it was like really interesting. You know, I feel like obviously Claude's relationship with Janice is better, more important, like it makes more sense. But I really liked Simone after like getting to know her like through those drafts. And so yeah, those are just a few. But I mean, I don't know if you feel the same way about your book, but there's a lot of stuff I do differently. But that's, you know, you don't get to do that. It's another world.
For me, like it's funny though, because with the short story collection, at least maybe there's at least one story where I'll write like almost like a sequel to it. But I think that's a story that has like the writer character in it, so it's almost like I can do this side of it. Now that but that story is very much about wanting to be on the outside looking in, or not even the outside, but way on the outside, imagining. I think I have more insight into some other side of it. But that's so interesting because Janice is such a important, huge character to this book. That's really interesting to think about. All right, man. I think that's all the questions we have. I want everyone to make sure that they grab Everywhere You Don't Belong. I don't have the paperback, but there it is. Thank you so much, man. This was dope. I'm glad I got to do this. Actually, it's beautiful work, man.
No, thanks for doing it. Now, hopefully we get to do it again. Right? Do it again.
I know, right? Soon. In the time where travel is a thing and we can do it in real life.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much to both of you for this fantastic conversation and for just like naming all of my favorite writers at the end too. So, like Tony Kane Bambara, yeah. Thank you all of you for joining us for this fantastic conversation. And please learn more about this beautiful book at harvard.com. I posted the link again in the chat. Please stay well, stay safe and warm in the blizzard or wherever you are. And thanks so much to both of you. Have a lovely evening.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Nana. Stay in touch. Stay safe out there too.
Of course, man. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. See you.